Thank you for tuning in to the SkillsAware podcast. We are a human-centered, AI-powered skills recognition engine transforming how people and organizations understand and grow their capabilities. Each episode features insightful conversations with industry leaders, experts, and innovators who share their knowledge, experiences, and ideas on workforce skills, skills recognition, skills literacy, artificial intelligence, and so much more.
Hi, I'm Dan McFadyen, co-founder and director at SkillsAware, and also a co-founder and the managing director at Edalex. And it's my great pleasure to be joined today by Yasmin King and Mark Keough. Yasmin, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm as Dan said, I'm Yasmin King. I'm the CEO of SkillsIQ and also a director and co-founder of SkillsAware.
And I'm Mark Keough. I'm the executive director of SkillsAware, but also a co-founder and director along with Dan and Yasmin, and really enjoying this new relationship and project as it comes to market. Perfect.
Well, Mark, I might direct it back to you to start, just in terms of your vision for SkillsAware, because you've had this thought for quite some time. So
more than 20 years.
Dan. Yeah.
More than 20 years. In 2000, I was at the end of the very early days of the learning management system business, and my business in Australia was bought by TMP Worldwide, who also owned Monster.com, who at the time were the big mover and shaker, early mover and shaker in the online recruitment business worldwide. And I got this glamorous title of inaugural vice president for Monster Learning. And so it was like climbing Mount Everest from, and suddenly someone saying, well, what are we going to do? And we came up with a couple of visions. One was to do college recruitment, which became a very successful business for Monster. I'm very proud of that business. But the second one was to try and match learning and jobs by sort of looking at skills. So that vision for me started in 2000. And in 2000, believe it or not, so this is 24 years ago, we hired a couple of Australians who came across, and they brought with them the Australian training package system. And we started to look at how we could use that as big data to try and match the very confusing language of skills in jobs and skills in learning. And I'll never forget flying. This is a very short story, but I flew overnight from Boston. And at the time I was consulting, I even met the Secretary of Labor at the end of the Clinton era, came and spent a day with me to talk about this. And I was working with the top people in the US Department of Labor on this. It was a really big problem about how you match skills learning and skills and jobs. And I remember flying from Boston to San Diego one night to go to the HR XML committee, which has morphed nowadays into the Open HR standard. And I went to the committee meeting, flew back overnight the next night to Boston from San Diego, went to the meeting, and I said, I think we should try and find a way of standardizing skill statements between jobs and learning. And they said, yeah, we've thought of doing that. It's ridiculous because we just can't trust the learning people to work with standards. So you can imagine that actually happened in 2000, late 2000. So I've been trying to get this problem solved for more than 20 years. And I've looked at lots of technologies, lots of issues, and it's really nice to be here today. The journey is taking me through blockchain as a credential validation idea. And then I rejected that because it's too hard to get. It's like herding sheep, getting people to work on standards-based skills statements, right? Everyone's got a slightly different view of what skills are, and it's a global problem. So there is no standardized approach to skills. So the breakthrough has been, so this idea has been around for a long time, but the breakthrough has been artificial intelligence, and particularly large language models, which allow us to take disparate language and find a harmonious standard where we can share information and find a common language. And that's what we're doing at SkillsAware. We're finding a common language for skills without throwing out all the other language everyone uses to describe skills. So that's my journey over 24 years in about a nutshell.
Brilliant. Now, Yasmin, you come from a very different perspective with SkillsIQ. So can you give us context for that and how that has helped generate and the genesis of SkillsAware?
Okay, so I mean, my initial background has actually always been involved in either policy or regulation for small business, and then I took on the role of CEO of one of the skills service organisations that were established to basically write, in conjunction with industry committees, the very training packages that Mark just referred to. And we did it for all of the services sector and the health sectors. So basically and also the public sector. So about 50% of the economy. And we did that for 7 years. And vocational education in Australia has had quite a extensive amount of reform. In fact, a good friend of mine actually went to the effort of counting how many reforms had occurred over the last 22 years, and it's currently the equivalent of a reform every fortnight.
Wow.
And so, we could see that yet again there was, when the Labor government came in under the last election, they changed to establishing jobs and skills councils. And essentially my team, who've been working in this space quite extensively for a long period of time, we just think that, we're worried they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's going to start all over again. We just don't have our heart in basically keeping on that journey. So, and because, we had run quite a successful business and had done other international consulting, particularly on standards worldwide and other work, we were in a fortunate position to have enough of a strong balance sheet for us to be able to say, well, okay, let's utilize what our skills are and pivot into doing something else. So, and one of the things we had always seen was the wicked problem was the fact that basically we didn't believe that there was a skills training problem. We believed there was a skills recognition problem, and it particularly stemmed from the work that we'd done, particularly in the community care sector, where, there are a lot of extremely experienced people, but they don't have any qualifications. That's partly their age. It's partly because, they tend to come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds because they're poorly paid, highly casualised female workforce, so don't have the opportunities. So there's a really big equity issue as well. And we could see that there was an approach from the government to go, well, the answer is let's just offer free courses. But in projects that we then spent the next year or so working on, we saw the evidence of how basically quality was not, being factored into. In fact, I had one of my people do a mystery shopping exercise of, getting an individual support qualification, and found that, one organisation said, well, don't worry about it. You can get it in 6 weeks. You only do one assessment. And we basically guide you through the answers, right? And, these are people who get to work with vulnerable people. And that was a massive concern to us, that quality wasn't being factored in. And yet you had other people who had all of this experience and were, basically, not even being considered if they wanted to move jobs because they had no qualification. So, this whole wicked problem of recognition has plagued the Australian system, and quite frankly, internationally. And we didn't see anything in the reforms that were happening once every fortnight that actually even attempted to address them. So, so I sort of really started thinking, I started talking to some major companies through my networks, and they all said, yep, recognition's a problem. But what they wanted was some sort of evidence base, right? They said, it's just not enough for us to just assess someone, look at someone and go, we want someone who's independent, who's doing that. So, and I sort of started looking around and saying, well, is there something that we could do? We knew that there were toolkits being developed, but they were all very manual and certainly, with the work that we'd done with higher ed, we know that nobody liked to do mapping of prior learning. So, and I had a coffee with a former colleague and sort of said, look, I'm looking to find a way to attack this, and I'm prepared to, stand behind it. There's got to be a better solution. She said, oh, you should talk to Mark Keough. He's been for years. And I went, okay. Yeah. And at the time, I think I made a phone call that afternoon. I think we then met for coffee, a day or so later. And that basically meant that, Mark sort of outlined what he was thinking. He said, I've got a great tech partner that I've done work with, and I think they've got a great platform, and this is a solution that we could build on this. And AI is now accessible and affordable. And I just went, look, I've been involved in entrepreneurial projects before, and so my attitude was, that sounds exactly like it makes sense. So let's just do it.
Perfect.
So who was that partner, I wonder?
I wonder who was that partner.
So you better tell that story, Dan.
Yes. Oh, thanks, Mark. So yes, at Edalex over the past coming up on 9 years, we've been focused in the skills space, and we develop platforms that enable skills definition. So with OpenRSD, we have what is now the world's largest open library of these rich skill descriptors, atomic level definitions of skills, to ensure that we are speaking the same language, which has already been referenced. So that's critical. And then skills development with the open source Open Aquila platform, and then Credentialate, which discovers and shares evidence of skills from learning. And those platforms together combined help support the recognition and the discovery of skills. And so we're starting to see these threads come together from Mark's 20+ year vision for this. Yasmin, your deep experience in the sector and discovering the need for skills recognition, and for us at Edalex, we strongly believe in giving a voice to learners for their own skills. And several years ago, we commissioned some market research that identified, of university graduates, only 33% felt comfortable voicing their own skills during their first job search. So again, here we are sending individuals through years of education, and yet they don't know what skills they have. And one of the stories that I love to share from a high school that we've worked with is from recounted from a student who went to one of the educators and said, I don't have any skills. I only work at Macca's, at McDonald's. And we say, really? Imagine someone, all the collaboration skills, time management, conflict resolution, all these skills. And yet that student didn't have a voice for their skills. There was no evidence. There's nothing to back that up, to give them the confidence. So I think that's, as SkillsIQ and Edalex and Mark have come together to form SkillsAware, that's really at the heart of our mission, is to give users a voice for their skills and evidence to back up those claims. So with that context, then what is SkillsAware? What does it actually do?
That's a good question, because you'd think, like, what was missing in the Edalex world to do this, what was missing in the SkillsIQ world, what was missing in my world to actually be able to execute on the vision. And the thing that was missing was the three pieces of this puzzle. Because Dan, and you and I have known each other a long time. One thing I would say too is we've experienced the benefits in 9 months of a trusted partnership. It's not driven by, a venture capitalist driving us to sales or, not driven by the tech per se. It's driven by the need in the marketplace, which I think we all agree on. And that's been an absolute joy to work with each of you and the rest of our team on that notion that we are looking to meet needs. And that means our development process is cyclical and improves and is going to take some time. But what we're really seeking to do is find the right person for the right job at the right time. And what we know, there is a wicked problem in the economy that governments have trouble solving. And that is, there are people who want jobs and there are jobs that want people. And the two can't seem to get together. There's a gap, right? There's a gap between the two. And so taking forward Yasmin's notion of the enablement, the self-enablement of recognition and your experience with that student, Dan, what we're doing now is providing a point-to-point, an end point, starting point to end point way in which someone can validate what they have and build a database of their skills, not just a resume, but a whole holistic view. And so SkillsAware captures evidence, uses artificial intelligence using large language models to standardize those statements and then store them for a variety of use cases. And the primary use cases we're seeing at the moment, but there's more ahead, are the recognition of prior learning towards qualifications. And the other primary use case is enterprise visibility. In other words, I've got 2,000 people, I've got 5,000 people, I've got 20,000 people. And I don't know what they can actually do because I've hired them on the basis of their resume or a job description or their qualifications. And they're all very flaky things. The job description is never quite what it is when you get into the job. The resume is a very shorthand representation of what you can actually do. And then we want people to progress and we want to hire and resource projects based on people's skills and capability, not on perceptions or subjective views and, so on. So what SkillsAware does is provide the tools to allow for skills-based hiring and skills-based resourcing for enterprises, but furthermore, a long-term database of validation for the individual about what they can do. And to do it in a language that everyone can understand because it's a common language. So the other thing it's a bit like a Tower of Babel. It's taking the various disparate skills definitions from all around the place. That's never going to be solved. People keep talking about making new skills taxonomies that are simpler and so on and so forth. But as soon as you add a new one, that just exponentially complicates the entire world of, that just multiplies skills definitions by another 1,000, Right. So what we need is a harmonization of skills definitions, not new and simpler. And so what we're doing here is we have a tool using artificial intelligence to harmonize skills definitions and make them accessible for both employees, for learners, for the public, but most importantly for enterprises who are trying to just get about their productivity and their work. So that may be a long explanation, but it covers all the bases, right? And that is that with SkillsAware in your world, you can actually go from the point of documenting all the things about you to a point where it's useful in the economy. And that's the SkillsAware journey. And it's what we're aiming to achieve. And it's a journey. We're not there perfectly yet, but we're a long way down the track. And that's fantastic. Thanks to you both, actually, and your belief in this vision. Yeah.
And I also think that, there's a fundamental difference in our approach in that we're saying that the learner has to be basically directing the journey, or because I think so much of is education led, be it qualifications or micro credentials or whatever. And it's very much a supply driven approach, right? And that's why there is such poor skills literacy. It's why your kid at McDonald's doesn't know that actually he has got quite significant skills, because even though he actually probably has done a Cert 3 in retail, because that is part of the McDonald's program. But it's actually not the Cert 3 in retail that is recognised by employers when they see someone's worked at a McDonald's. What they see is it's somebody who knows how to show up, who knows how to follow directions, who's, understands how to deal with customers, including very difficult ones. So it's that and if you aren't told that they are things that an employer values, then you don't know what to articulate. And that's particularly true for the fact that, I think it's something like 40% of Australians over the age of 50 don't have any qualifications at all. And so if you ask them, and I do this regularly, with some of the tradies who come and do work at my place, and I'll say, so, what skills do you think they have? And I'm often told, oh, no, I don't have any because I left school when I was in year 10, right? Because, they did an old style apprenticeship that didn't actually have a formal qualification. And these are people who are doing extraordinarily complex jobs in terms of and highly skilled, but they don't think that they actually have got any skills. And so, for me, I think the fact that, and I think part of the reason why this grouping has worked so effectively is that we all have the same value principles that we're coming from. And that is that we all fundamentally believe this has to be learner driven, okay? But big benefits are actually to enterprises, right? Because you talk to any organization and they will tell you recruitment, retention, all of that is high. And it's going to get even tougher because everybody's having their resumes written by AI.
That's right. And then they're reviewed by AI as well, right?
And they're reviewed by AI. And there's an incredible sameness to it all. So how do you then, and so how much absolute talent is left on the floor because, the system that wrote it and the system that's evaluating it hasn't been able to understand what are the real key things that these people can do. And I think the fact that we are looking at this from that conversational style journey of drawing out from people what they need, but then evaluating it against standards, and also providing an evidence base means that, we're creating a holistic approach, but it's still fundamentally is for the value of the individual. And for me, that is I think that's why we all are coming from the same fundamental principle.
And it's granular, Yasmin. Like it's right down at the what can I do, We all use the example of a barista, right? What can a barista do? Well, you could describe a skill as being a barista, but that's not very helpful. When you start describing it as being able to choose the milk, choose the beans, negotiate with the customer, understand an order, write the order down, deliver the order, all those underlying tasks, they're the tasks that are transferable. Not being we all want our own barista, of course, but I'd like one at home. Thank you very much. But the transferable skills are the underlying tasks that they know, and so we're working at that granular level. Did we say the other day approximately 62,000 tasks we have in SkillsAware, and they're organised into the 15,000 units of competency in the Australian training system, but they could easily be mapped to other frameworks. So we've started with working with the Australian training system, but it could work with any other system. And a lot of that's down to the work, the platform work you've done, Dan, over the years. Like, we could not build the top end on this if we did not have such a robust, reliable private data platforms with integrity, such as Aquella and Credentialate. So, it's just fantastic, Dan, to be working with you.
Thank you. No, much
And I think it's also the fact that what we've done effectively is flip the model of this concept of, there's too much granularity and too much detail. And instead of going, this is a really bad thing, we've gone, hang on a minute, in the world of data, that's a fantastic thing.
Right.
We've just got to present it in a useful way.
And you've just got to make it so that it actually has some value to add. So, and sure, that granularity is one of the big frustrations of learning providers who are trying to, make money and want to churn out volume, et cetera, et cetera. And you can have any color you like as long as it's black, as I'm fond of saying. I don't care that there's 50 different electives. We only offer 2, and too bad if you want the others,
right.
Et cetera, et cetera. But if you can value somebody against the fact that there is all this granularity and say, well, hang on a minute, you might not have that skill, but you've got that skill, then, that richness of that task data is actually a benefit, not a disadvantage. And particularly when it's been developed over 40 years by industry and validated by industry. So, that for me is, one of the things that I have found, exciting about this is that we've just basically flipped the problem, and gone, we need to think about it differently.
I've got a question for you, Dan, because you and I have worked together for, 12 years on different projects. So I knew your products very well and I knew how valuable they were. But you've always worked on a platform basis and have worked with customers for their end solutions. So your business model up until now has been to provide good platforms that a customer can implement to meet their custom requirements. And you guys do that so well. You've now got involved in an end-to-end solution. What drove you to that?
Well, that's great insight. And we think about when we talk and think about SkillsAware, we think about a service, right? So service as software, which we've talked about flipping the models. Whereas you're right, traditionally we've provided platforms that serve as the plumbing of the skills ecosystem. But for us, one of the Yasmin, you've referenced wicked challenges, and the wicked challenge for us that we love to tackle. I mentioned giving learners a voice for their skills, but let's broaden that. Let's look at the workforce and workforce transformation, and really think, how do we recognize for users, for people, the skills they gain from life? So not just from formal education, but also informal. So perhaps something, their hobby, they may work in or enjoy leading groups and volunteering with the Scouts. So what skills are they gaining from that? From non-formal learning, informal as well as formal learning. So really the opportunity to support and recognize all that, and then to provide that as an easy to use service. That's a game changer for us, and we hope for industry as well as individuals. So it really for us, that's part of why we're just so excited and energized with SkillsAware and the potential that it brings. So that's a bit of my excitement shining through.
Mark made the comment that the right skill, the right people at the right time. We like to say it's the right skills in the right place at the right time. Yeah. And for me, an example, I'm talking to one of the major volunteer organisations of not-for-profit that deals a lot when there's emergencies, and one of the things that really struck with me was him talking about how when there was a major fire, and his volunteers were called to basically be involved in the community to provide support, that they had this situation where his employee, the social worker, was project managing what was happening in the community, and completely underskilled. Have amazing empathy, but actually not project management skills. That wasn't their background. And at the same time, the former managing director of a major logistics company, volunteer in the community, was in the back folding blankets for people as they were going to be sleeping in the hall. And he said to me, because I don't know who in my volunteer community has what skills. So, for me to actually make sure I've got the right people with the right skills in the right place, I don't have visibility. And I think that really is. So for me, it's not only about doing the right thing for individuals. I think there's a societal benefit, right? If we can promulgate this and basically change people's perceptions about how you recognise what people can do, particularly as you say, people learn so much through volunteering. I know one of my kids did a Gold Duke of Ed, and would say to you that she learnt more out of doing that than probably her undergraduate degree in many ways.
Yep.
Because of the challenges that brought forward. So and we don't really try and drill down what skills those people have learnt through doing those sort of volunteer programs. And there's so many people who contribute to their communities that could add so much value to society.
Not just socially though, economically, because the cost of finding the right person is a hidden microeconomic cost at the moment, right? Like, we all go to hire someone and it's like a nightmare. You end up with 1,000 applications, and as you've both said, now the application's written by AI, the job description's written by AI, the evaluation's is done by AI. Like it's you're just never going to get the right person that way, right?
Right.
Because it's a people factor thing, getting the right person, you've got to know something about the person. So, and that's costly. So what we're trying to do is reduce the cost of getting that person with the right skills. I'm updating my label there, Yasmin, the person with the right skills in the right place at the right time. That's SkillsAware's number one value proposition, is to reduce the cost of doing that.
It's about productivity. If we're serious about productivity, we've got to get better at using technology to do things smarter. And it's not about replacing people. It's about taking the onerous work that people don't enjoy doing, so they can actually do what they're really good at. And it's not about saying, well, hang on a minute, if we have a lot of RPL, is this going to mean that there isn't going to be a need for educators? Absolutely not. What it will mean is that those educators can do better in terms of actually training people on the bits that they actually need, as opposed to making them repeat things they already know, and hopefully will basically really help us move away from the whole compliance mentality of training that we have in this country. Because if you're training for compliance, you're not upskilling people. So we can talk about lifelong learning and, improving, but if all you're doing is making people do the same compliance training, there's no capacity for them to have time to actually upskill.
You're exactly right. And I was attended a learning summit that a local university sponsored recently, and we heard exactly the same thing from industry, saying, well, if they have 87 hours of required compliance training that they've done, and if they've moved from a comparable, another company in the same industry, they had that 87 hours last year, and so there's just no capacity, cost, ability, both from the employer perspective or the employee to say, to have that mental bandwidth and time. So what?
And from a learning, sorry, Dan, but from a learning institution point of view, we're already starting to see evidence that when RPL is done properly, right, efficiently, and there is tangible evidence of this, that it increases enrollments and increases the dollars spent by those people who enroll with the learning institution, not reduces enrollments or takes away, or reduces the income. It's the opposite, because SkillsAware is a recruitment tool for training providers. It's a way of getting more people into the tent.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think the other, the cost of I know if I pick the care sector, what I hear from employers is that they lose a percentage of people that they recruit during that first induction phase because they go, I'm not doing this again. I've done this before. Why am I doing it again? I don't want to. And because they have other options, they move on. So if you think about what it's cost that employer to actually recruit that person, try and onboard them, etc. One employer told me 13% of their new hires basically quit during that induction phase.
Wow, that's massive. Right. Wow. So,
there's got to be a better way.
Absolutely. And Yasmin, you mentioned earlier in the discussion, that the equity lens, and I think when we look not just here domestically in Australia, but when we look globally, for those who in America, for example, those who have started but have not finished a university degree, it's 79 million people and growing every day. So we're and unfortunately today those people have a black mark against them because they started but did not finish, and there's no recognition of what skills they've gained through partial completion of that degree, so through that formal education, but everything else that they've gained through life, so through employment, through volunteer, through hobbies, all of their other interests. So there's huge uplift there as well. So
and so many of those people, their circumstance that forces them to drive. It's not that I don't want to do it. Often it's a family challenge or crisis or whatever that has meant that they've had to stop, right? And certainly, again, if I think about in the care sector, the number of people who have carers' responsibilities and what they do and how they manage, and it means that they've had limited opportunities to do other things because they've had a massive care responsibility. And if you could, and instead of saying, well, sorry, you haven't got a qual, so there's no place for you in the world. If you could harness those extraordinary skills that those people have, and they are extraordinary, give them a pathway to have another opportunity of employment because their care responsibilities have changed. Can you imagine what we would be able to unlock? And I think that's where, for me, we really have to start to do more than just use the benchmark of a qualification of itself as evidence, because evidence can come from many different places. And I think that's one of the really inspirational things that SkillsAware is trying to do, is to say, we're not saying, say you can do something and that's okay. We are validating and verifying the evidence that somebody says that they can do something. But it's just not, have you got a piece of paper? So that plumber who, left school at year 10, you can say, well, actually, you've probably got the equivalent of, a building qualification based on the jobs that you've done over the last 30 years. So you're a lot more than, no, I left school in year 10.
And picking up a theme you raised, Dan, just quickly, you talked about the flip of the coin from software as a service to service software. So software as a service that we're all used to is things like, accounting, like MYOB or Xero, or travel sites, like, Webjet or Qantas or Jetstar or Virgin, where you log on to the cloud and you get a service based on their strict set of rules, so you operate to their set of rules. What we're doing is in the brave new world of adaptive software. And therefore, what the software does and this is people talk about AI, but the real benefit of this is that it becomes adaptive and learns. So then that's why we're saying we're services software. And what we want to do, there are millions and millions of HR managers, recruiters, people, team leaders who are spending an inordinate amount of time trying to find the right person with the right skills, right? We're not saying those people are going to go away. We're just offering them a better service. That's all. And saving perhaps 60, 70% of their time.
Brilliant. And one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten from early users, one was incredibly excited, just saying, "Skills? I have skills." And again, it's a language that people are just not used to expressing themselves, but we know that's what industry wants. So again, bringing that lens, supporting those in HR, supporting those from an organization perspective, but ultimately coming back to the individual and giving them a voice. Yeah. And as you said, Yasmin, that evidence, right, to back up that claim, and so that's incredibly useful for the organization, but also for that individual to give him that voice for their skills.
And that skills literacy piece is so critical, because I think even, when I see, media reports that talk about skills and they mix job roles with the concept of skill mix. Yeah, I mean, there isn't a universal definition. So actually having a standardized approach to how you evaluate is a significant benefit. And it's not that it's just going to be the Australian training package system. I mean, I think as Mark likes to refer to, you can plug in any dictionary, any framework, any approach that somebody says, "Oh, that's what we measure against," that's fine. But the issue is, what you need is to standardize it, and then you need to make sure that you're then actually validating and providing evidence against it. So, I mean, we've started with the Australian training package system because that's what we have and we know, but it could be anything. It could be a digital skills framework. It can be, a capability framework for the care sector, whatever.
Right.
There's one common theme to what we do, and are we so fortunate to have got the name SkillsAware, because it's exactly what we do. Right? It's nice that we got in early and got that name, but the simple way of seeing is when you're considering a person, do they know and can they do? Simple as that. And everything else is complex language about describing whether they know and can do. But we're aware that we're trying to give people a sense of what they know and what they can do, and the utility, the enablement, the empowerment to the agency, if you like, to share it.
Well said. Fantastic. Well, great discussion. Yeah, I think that actually sums it up nicely. But yeah, Yasmin, anything you'd like to add?
No, I've just found this whole, I think we've achieved an enormous amount in effectively what's been just under a year.
Well under a year. We turned the first sod of soil on the 1st of May from memory. So we've achieved an enormous amount to be where we are. We can't wait for next year. Hey.
Yeah, that's right.
Having said that, I mean, it was because we all came with a lot of foundations to build upon and to put together. So and it's been not much sleep over the last little while, but I think it's exciting, because I think it isn't technology or a service trying to find a market. We are addressing a real problem that exists. And I just think we've been fortunate enough to find the right people to come together to actually solve it.
Wholeheartedly agree. And I think the feedback that we get when we explain SkillsAware, okay, so I work in the travel industry. Here's my challenge. Or hey, I work in volunteer. Hey, I work in industry. And everyone gets it. And they which is that excitement and that imperative is contagious. And so the excitement is building. So much more, even better things to come as we
let's not be
broader ecosystem. Yeah.
And let's be aware, this is adaptive software. So, we are where we are today. It's not perfect. It's good, not perfect. It's going to get better and better and better because it will teach itself how to be better. So that's great. We're just the stewards, the shepherds of the process, I see.
Thanks for tuning into this SkillsAware podcast episode. Don't forget to follow us on your podcast app so you don't miss a thing, and be sure to visit our website at skillsaware.com to learn more.